Hi everybody, Mary here from EFIC. I'm delighted to be joined by Isabel Ellerbrock to talk about her session at next year's EFIC Congress. So Isabel, thanks for joining us for this. Would you start by just introducing yourself and telling us a bit about your background?
Yes, hello. Thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity. My name is Isabel Ellerbrock. I obtained my PhD at the University Hospital in Hamburg in Germany. I studied underlying processes of habituation and sensitization, and also cognitive modulation of pain using brain imaging. And until last year, I was a postdoc at the Department of Clinical Neuroscience at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, where I studied mechanisms underlying chronic pain disorders, particularly fibromyalgia, and the influence of genetic markers. My main research interest is different mechanisms underlying chronification of pain, and I have usually used several MRI techniques in my studies. I currently work in a company to implement the use of scientific methods and support the development of tools for experimentation.
Great. And what will be the topic of your plenary session at EFIC Congress?
My presentation will focus on a study of serotonin in association with mood, pain, and GABA in fibromyalgia patients. So generally, serotonin is involved in the regulation of pain and emotion, and specifically, the serotonergic system is involved in endogenous pain modulation, so in the descending inhibitory pathways in the central nervous system. It has also been suggested to be impaired in fibromyalgia, which is the patient group that I will focus on in my presentation. So I will talk about these systems, serotonin and GABA, and how they may be linked with respect to mood and pain processing.
Okay, and that's very interesting. So regarding serotonin, how do you think it affects pain? What do we know so far about its role?
Yeah, so serotonin is involved in control and nociceptive transmission, and it can exert inhibitory and facilitatory effects, so both of them. And it is also, like I said, common in fibromyalgia, but also in possible comorbidities, so for example, depression. And mechanisms that influence serotonergic signaling, for example, genetic polymorphisms, can therefore affect mood and this endogenous pain modulation. And serotonergic signaling is critically regulated by, for example, 5-HT receptors, so 5-HT being serotonin. And here we focused on 5-HT1A receptor, which is one of them, which when activated produces an inhibitory effect on sensory transmission. And the second one that we focus on is the serotonin transporter. And these two separately, these polymorphisms of these two genes are linked to serotonergic signaling, but we also, in the study that I will present, investigated interaction effects between the two to account for the fact they may elicit actually a combined effect. So for example, two genotypes together produce higher signaling than just one of them separately. And this interaction is something that has actually been found before with response to SSRIs. And in the literature, it has also been shown that individuals with a more efficient serotonergic system displayed less, for example, depressive symptoms based on this combined effect of the two genetic polymorphisms. And in this current study, we focus on fibromyalgia patients as reduced serotonin in the CSF and also increased frequency of certain genetic variations were associated. So certain genetic variations associated with serotonin point to a generally dysregulated serotonergic system in this particular patient group.
And in terms of GABA, how does GABA relate to this study, and why is it important in pain?
Yeah, GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the CNS, and it is also crucially involved in nociceptive transmission. While serotonin as well as GABA have been associated with mood and modulating pain separately, but there are also many systems, including these two, that are intricately linked in their actions. So higher serotonergic activity increases GABA release. and thereby enhancing inhibition and modulating sensory signals. For example, that has been shown in the thalamus. And on the flip side, if there's a lack of inhibition, this would result in higher nociceptive signaling. Taken together, there are interactions between those two systems, serotonergic and GABA, in several levels of the central nervous system, and including those that involved in pain modulation. In this study, we look at them in a combined way in order to understand whether they influence pain processing in fibromyalgia and also whether they affect affective characteristics, so for example, depression and anxiety. And here we also have one more thing, which is a general dysfunctional pain inhibition that has been demonstrated in fibromyalgia patients. So specifically something related to a lower pain-related brain activation in the rostral anterior cingulate cortex, the RACC, and the thalamus, which I mentioned before, has been found. And so that's why we focus the measurement of GABA and functional MRI, so during pain processing, on these two specific brain regions.
Great. So it's very interesting, intricate stuff. So you can't give us the results today, so we have to wait for Budapest 2023. But if you were to sell the study, why should people come along and attend your session? What are the main things to learn?
Yeah, so as far as we know, this is the study, this is the first one showing some interactions between these two serotonin relevant genes regarding mood in fibromyalgia patients, but it's also interesting because we did find some effects that were also true for healthy controls. So this isn't necessarily just specific to fibromyalgia, but also general mechanisms and systems how pain works in all of us. And our findings provide some evidence for an association between the serotonergic system and GABA levels. And the teaser is in the thalamus. But I think this topic could also be of great interest to the community, as it not only focuses on pain, so potential differences in cerebral pain processing and pain sensitivity, but it also focuses on a really interesting part on depression and anxiety, as these are two mood-related comorbidities, or at least things that are very prominent in chronic pain patients and also in fibromyalgia patients. So it covers different topics that are important in pain and in pain research, I think. So I hope you will all attend.
Yeah, that's excellent. And last year's Congress did focus on comorbidity between mood disorders and pain, for example. So that's a great follow-up. So if anybody wants to find out more about the Congress or register for Budapest, please check out the EFIC website. So thanks, Isabel, and see you next year at the Congress.